Today is Saturday, August 24th, 2024, and the location of the interview is in Walla Walla, Washington. Dixie Ferguson and Vic Phillips, the videographer, are conducting the interview. I am interviewing Tim Camarata, veteran of the United States Marine Corps. So, Tim, where were you born?
Huntington Beach, California.
And what war did you serve in?
Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Afghanistan.
Yes.
Excuse me. And what was your rank upon leaving the service?
E3.
Okay. And where in all did you serve?
Did boot camp and infantry school in between San Diego and Camp Pendleton. Then was stationed in Hawaii, Kaneohe Bay, with 3-3, was with Lima Company. From there, I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. I think we left May 17th seems right, but I don't really know exactly what date it was that we actually departed, but I think it was the 17th of May. Went to the Helmand province, spent about 7 months over there, came back, and a few months later, they started talking about how our sister battalion needed 20 what they called combat replacements, 20 guys to volunteer to go finish off their deployment with them, which meant like 5 months rather than 7 or 8. But it was a whole different deployment. Anyways, me and 19 other guys volunteered for that, so then ended up going right back to very close to where we were on our first deployment. Got there, were given a random rifle and sent to a random platoon.
We're going to get into that, Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry. Afghanistan and Hawaii, that would be the short answer. Stationed in Hawaii, deployed to Afghanistan.
Excellent,
yeah.
Excellent. And by the way,
just rabbit trailing through that answer, I guess.
Trust me. We'll go all over the map.
Yeah.
And by the way, years of service, what years did you serve?
I went in January of 2009, January 5th, and I got out in 2013, roughly in March, middle of March.
Okay, excellent.
I feel like I should remember that date, but I don't remember what date it was. Oh, you know what? It was December 28th I came home. That's right, of 12. Sorry.
2012?
Yes, yeah. December 28th of 12, I just realized.
Gotcha.
March was, well, we'll get into that later.
Excellent. And so where were you living at the time that, well, Marine Corps, obviously you joined, not drafted, but joined.
Correct.
And where were you living at the time?
I was living in Spokane with my family, my mom and dad and siblings.
And why did you join the Marine Corps?
I've been asked that question a lot, and I feel like a different answer typically comes out from the last time I was asked that question, but it kind of still holds to the same core answer. But growing up, I always wanted to be in the military. I didn't really know enough about it when I was a little guy. But even as a little kid, I was playing with G.I. Joes, and my buddies and I would run around with a stick when we were 8 years old, pretending we were soldiers or whatever, because we didn't know anything. We were just action figure kids. And then I was 11 and a half, I guess, when September 11th happened. And I remember that kind of solidifying it in me, when even though I was still just a little boy, it was kind of like okay, this is, when I'm old enough to be a man and go do that, that's what I'm going to go do. And
that left an impression on you.
It did, yeah. And I remember being 11, and it took me some time. Like, my mom was crying in the kitchen and all this stuff, and I'm like, what's everyone freaking out about? And then eventually Dad kind of explained what everything was, and I started seeing more stuff on the news, and I was like, oh my God. And when you're 11, you see that as like bad guys. I knew something's going to happen out of this. Like, they're not just going to let this happen. And sure enough, then I grew up, seeing on the news guys like Miguel and some of his peers, Marines older than me. When I was 11, 12, 15, 18 years old, I'm seeing all this stuff on the news. I'm like, these guys are out there getting it. And that's what I wanted to do. So I joined for that reason.
So,
a lot of guys have these answers of, and there is obviously honor in it, and it was a very honorable experience. But to me, it wasn't for that. It was like, oh, bad guys did something bad, I'm going to grow up and go join the good guys, was basically like my adolescent thinking on it. And then when I grew up, I started looking more into it, and I'm like, yeah, I absolutely still want to do this.
Oh, that's
I
fascinating.
enlisted before I told my parents.
Oh, you did? Oh, well, I need to
Yeah.
ask you about that. Was there any military members in your family at that point?
Yeah, two of my grandfathers were, I think one Navy, one Air Force. In fact, even I think all three of my grandfathers were Navy, Air Force, and Army.
Do you think that had some influence also?
Yeah, I think so. Especially my grandpa George. He made it all the way to lieutenant colonel,
Okay.
and he's always kind of been a good influence on me and a mentor of sorts.
Mhm.
You know, we've always lived states apart, but we've had email and each other's phone number, and so yeah, I think he would probably have been the primary mentor. The other two, I never really knew much about their service other than that they were in, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so back to joining or deciding to join before you told your parents. Would you like to get into that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they remember that, but I bet they do. I kind of forget it sometimes myself, but I mean, it had been talked about. It had never been like, okay, I'm doing this. It had been like, oh, maybe I'll be a fireman. Maybe I'll join the Marine Corps. Maybe I'll be a fireman. Maybe I'll be a Marine. And that was kind of my thing, and all throughout high school, you know. And I, anyways, it was never a like, okay, mom and dad, I decided I'm gonna go. You know, here's my recruiter. It was not. I didn't do it that way. What I did was I went into the recruiter's office and I said, I just turned 18. I've got a diploma. And it was the Marine Corps recruiters. I didn't go to any of the others. I just went straight in there. I went straight in there and I said, I've got a diploma. I can run. I can do push-ups and pull-ups. And I don't remember how I worded it, but I said, I want to be a rifleman or a machine gunner. I want to be, you know, part of that part of the Marine Corps, because I know there are other jobs in there that, you know, you could be a fireman in the Marine Corps, which is something that my parents had, or someone had suggested. But anyways, I just basically went in there and said, infantry, I'm fully qualified, give me the pen.
Did they lock the door?
The whole thing kept no. Yeah, no, they weren't. They were definitely eager to get me in a chair, and they're like, "Oh, this kid's ready." And I was just like, "I'm ready to do this," you know. And he's like, "Well, we have this huge, you know, catalog. You can look through all your different options for MOSs, different specialties." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll take a look at it." And I found one that said O3. I think it's O3XX, so it's like an infantry package, and then from there you know, choose your specialty within it. But I found that one and I was like, infantry, I think that's what I'm looking for. That sounds right. And because I didn't know anything about the military. I just went in there. I was like, who's the guy with the rifle? And his buddy has a machine gun. Get me in there. And sure enough, so
this kid's been watching movies.
Yeah, I'd been watching a lot of movies. That's the thing. And I mean, I grew up watching the news of seeing a lot of things like that where it was like, those guys, whoever those guys are. So anyways, I went in there and I was probably the easiest recruiting job they ever did. I mean, somebody got a check mark on their monthly quota just from a 1 minute conversation. But then
you made someone's day.
Yeah, exactly. So they went through all the different options and formalities and all that stuff. And I think that I can't remember exactly if they have you sign the enlistment that day or if there's like an intent or something like that. But whatever it was, I went in there and I signed and agreed to enlist. And Sergeant Mestel was my recruiter's name.
There you go.
A little short guy, and he was from Priest Lake, Idaho, I want to say, or somewhere in Idaho, pretty close by. So he got recruiting duty kind of at home. Anyways, he's like, well, we should go tell your folks. So he stayed in his full dress blue uniform, and I was in whatever an 18-year-old kid wears, you know. And we showed up to my folks' house.
And he went with you?
He went with me. And I called my mom. I want to say this is how it went. I called my mom and said, I'm having a friend over for dinner. And they're like, oh, okay. So they, you know, made an extra place setting. And sure enough, we get there. And I walk up to the house that I live in with my parents, you know, and he knocks on the door. And I'm like about to open the door. And I realize, oh, he's doing a whole thing. And so sure enough, mom and dad both come to the door because they had a feeling it was something special. I think they might have expected me to bring a girl home. But they open the door and here's me and this sergeant with, you know, all his getup on, and he introduces himself and we walk in the door, and I think they kind of expected it to be like, hey, we're having talks about enlistment, whatever. And I just told him, I was like, so I enlisted in the Marine Corps. This is my recruiter, and we're here for dinner. So they got.
What did they say?
They were. I can't remember what they said. I want to say they were shocked, but also kind of expecting it. I don't think they expected me to do it that way, but that kind of just set the tone for the rest of my adult life, that they're just like, well, we didn't expect you to do it that way, but we love you.
Did he actually stay for dinner?
I want to say he stayed for, I don't know if it was dinner or if we had a cup of coffee or what we did, but we visited for a little bit, yeah.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah, they were not really expecting that.
But they were okay. That's your decision.
Oh, it was a supportive. Yeah, it was definitely received with support. It was a surprise, and it was kind of like, "Are you sure?" But it was definitely not anything negative. It was very much like, I think Mom shed a couple tears, but they were proud of my son, but also worried tears.
Sure. Were you at all afraid when you went through that recruiter's door?
No, not the recruiter's door. No.
Totally, yeah.
I had already wanted to for so long that it was almost like a rewarding thing that I just went off and did by myself. It was almost kind of like, I'm not going to say spur of the moment, because like I said, it was years that I had wanted to do that. But I want to say I was just out running errands, or maybe I just got off work or something like that. And I just popped in there.
I love the story.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so how much time passed before you actually reported for duty?
So that was only supposed to be a month. I want to say it was like I was 4 or 6 weeks before I was supposed to go to MCRD San Diego. Well, during that 4 to 6 weeks when I was supposed to be staying out of trouble and doing my pull-ups, I got pulled over and arrested for driving excessive speeds, and I was going way too fast. I mean, I'm talking, by the time I pulled over, I had my hands out the window. This deputy was clearly upset, yelling at me, telling me to, blah, blah, blah. He arrested me, sitting in the back of the car. Give me one reason I shouldn't take your dumb ass to jail right now. And it's midnight on a Saturday night. And I let out a big deep breath, and there's a little Marine Corps sticker on the back of my car. I wasn't even in yet. And I said, because, sir, I'm however many days out from flying to San Diego for MCRD. And he kind of stopped in his tracks. I mean, he was like typing on his laptop, and you could tell he was upset about what he was having to do. And he looked up and kind of just stopped in his tracks and said, MCRD San Diego? And I said, yes, sir. And he didn't say another word. He got out of the car, he came around, he opened it up, he uncuffed me, pulled me out. And I can't quite remember what he said, but he basically let me know that the judge in that town was a retired Marine, and that the sheriff is a retired from another branch. And basically he lessened it from 144 miles per hour in a 65 down to 85 in a 65. So I still had to pay a fine and go to court, and then basically it was this deal was, we'll completely wipe this from your record if you spend 6 months in this county getting in zero trouble, not even a parking ticket. Deferment is what they called it. Because I was going crazy fast, and he even lowered it down just to keep me out of jail, but it still was pretty bad. So I kind of had to hunker down, and I went and got a job at a local landscaping company, and I did that for 6 months, and I deployed right after New Year's on January 5th.
January 5th.
So during that time, I was in this delayed entry program for 7 months, I want to say.
You in the what?
Delayed entry program.
Delayed,
Yeah, it's just for guys waiting to go to boot camp, guys and gals. And I met these two guys, Hank and Sean, who I'm still friends with to this day. We ended up going on the buddy program because they each, for different reasons, couldn't go until after New Year's.
Great.
But anyways.
So you went in together?
We went in together, yeah, the three of us did, yeah.
Love it. And then you flew to San Diego.
Flew to San Diego January 5th. Yeah, stayed out of trouble. The court released the whole thing, and it never hit my record. So
great. Fantastic.
Now I drive like a grandpa.
So I want to hear about your arrival in San Diego Airport.
Oh man, it starts at the airport. It doesn't start when you get on the yellow footprints. You've already got yelled at least 10 times by the time you get there. Which nobody told me that. They told me that at boot camp you're getting screamed at. The recruiter never said, when you get off the airplane at Alaska Airlines, there's going to be a dude in a hat. No, not right as you get off the airplane, but it was like there were a few different groups that we all had to meet up, and they had some guy who was also going to boot camp, but he was kind of in charge. So everyone was supposed to meet up with him, and I think we all had a packet or something. Anyways, by the time we met up with him, there were drill instructors that escorted us from inside the airport to outside the airport and onto a bus. And they weren't 100% drill instructors. They were like, it was like a sugar-free drill instructor. They got us on this bus, and they say, you gotta sit like this, don't look, don't move your head, don't do anything, just sit there silently. You ride on this bus, and it's right across the street, so you're probably taking 2 lefts and a right, and then you pull in, and it's like, oh damn, we're here already. And then that's when the chaos starts. They're screaming at you, get off the bus. You all go line up on these yellow footprints. I'm sure you've heard of them.
And I have to ask you, how long was your hair?
My hair was probably about like this. I think I actually kept this haircut pretty similar before I was in. In fact, I've always had this haircut. Now that I think of it. So my hair was about this length, yeah. And a couple guys I knew shaved their heads like the night before, and you're not supposed to do that. For whatever reason, you're not supposed to do that. But anyways, yeah, so we all piled out of this bus. I don't know, maybe 50 or 70 guys probably. And you go one by one in there. They shave your head. You have to tell them if you have any moles. They shave it all off, and they're not exactly gentle about it because they're doing hundreds of them a day, you know.
Is this like 2 a.m.?
Probably in there, yeah. Maybe midnight. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't really remember what time it was, but somewhere in there, yeah. It's dark out. You should be in bed. Well, then after that, you go through the hall, and then there's down to this area where they have everyone wait. Well, I never found out what everyone was doing during their waiting after a haircut because I got pulled aside by a drill instructor and said, "You stand right here like a scarecrow." And I didn't know what he meant. He said, "Stand right here like a scarecrow." And I'm like, "Aye, aye, sir." So I just stood there, like this. And he goes, "No, idiot." And he points down the hallway. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I stand there and I point down the hallway. And he goes, "Every time someone runs by, you say, 'This way, recruit.' And you keep your arm straight out the whole time." I'm like, "Oh, I can do that. Okay, my first little job in boot camp." Oh, 7 or 8 minutes into that, I was sitting here like this. "Oh my God, it hurts. I gotta keep it up. They're gonna catch me. This way, recruit." And they all go running by, and one by one, these dudes all just scared, shaved head, looking like a newborn baby. And my arm is just giving out. And I'm just like, what? How do I do it? And every once in a while, like, nobody would be around. I'd try to stretch my arm, and I'd hear from around the corner someone scream at me, "Get your arm up." I'm like, "How did you even see me?" So eventually they come and bring everybody back together, and we went and did all this processing. They have you put your wallet and your phone or whatever you got in a bag and turn in all your stuff. They give you some goofy shoes, some goofy running shoes that they're called Go Fasters. It's like.
So what were you thinking at this point, Jim?
I was thinking I've been here for 30 minutes and I'm already super sore and I've been screamed at. My arm, it hurt because I can do this for a couple minutes, no problem. But 15, 20 minutes probably went by and they want me to keep it straight out. I'm like, dude, I don't have it in me.
Still didn't get cold feet.
No, at that point I was like, well, I'm here. No. But yeah, that was the first night. First week of boot camp is just a lot of receiving, getting shots, getting your uniforms fitted and stuff. And then after that, the real boot camp starts.
And could you describe a typical day at a boot camp, if there's such a thing?
A typical day? Well, there's 3 phases of boot camp, so it depends on what phase you're in. The third phase is like, all right, you're learning rifle skills and you're learning, how to conduct yourself as a Marine. Whereas the second phase, and the first phase especially, the first phase is like, rip these idiots apart. Get them down to nothing so that they're just standing there shivering in their undies. And then second and third phase, we'll give them a little bit back at a time.
Did you understand what they were trying to do?
Yeah, I knew from ahead of time that that was the idea.
Yeah.
You're supposed to break down the old so there's nothing left and then build new off of that.
And that probably did
Marine Corps is kind of weird that way.
psychologically.
Yeah, I think so. What helped me the most psychologically is just knowing that this is going to be over and I'll be proud of it. And this is how they do it. And obviously it works, so I'm just going to let them do it.
Smart.
But also, I was a little shit in boot camp. All through the Marine Corps, I was a little shit.
Do you want to describe that?
Yeah, so there's, in a platoon, there's 4 squads, in a boot camp platoon at least. And each one has a squad leader. So within a platoon of, 50, 60 guys, maybe more, there's 4 squad leaders, and they all report to one guide. And those are all recruits. Those are all 18-year-old shaved head kids. But one guy's in charge, then he's got 4 guys in charge under him. Well, I was the 4th squad leader for the first few weeks. And I don't know what I did. I laughed at something, or I did something stupid where Staff Sergeant Collins, who, my nemesis in boot camp, that guy was always out to get me. Well, I decided for some reason I'm going to take it upon myself to always be out to get him. And what I meant by that was their drill instructors are not allowed to smile. You never see him smile. But once in a while, you can get him to crack a little sidebar grin when he thinks no one's looking. And that became my challenge because he fired me from being a squad leader. He said, "You're done. You're garbage." He said, my friend Hank Nelson and I still say this to each other. He says, "You're the most scandalous garbage squad leader in the history of recruit training."
Did that bother you?
Oh, it made me laugh. I was laughing my ass off, and he knew it because he knew that would make me giggle because obviously he didn't mean it. But the word scandalous just came in there so unexpectedly. And he's this super juiced up weightlifting dude. You know, he's got tattoos all over, and he's just like bald head, and you can tell he could just whoop anybody's ass. That type of dude. And he's just up like flexing right at me, and like he's almost shaking. He's like, "You just garbage, you garbage, Camarata." And I'm like, "Aye, sir." And but he was doing it not like to try to hurt me. He was doing it to try to see if he could get me to break, and he got me to break. Sure enough, I got fired. A couple weeks later, they had this track that I want to say is a half mile. It's large, much larger than like a high school track was. And it's a dirt running track. And there was some, I can't remember how he worded it, but it was essentially, whoever beats me around this track can be our new squad leader, because somebody had just gotten fired from the job that I got fired from. Yeah. And I was like, I've been holding back. I can run pretty fast. So I decided this is where I'm going to get it. And we did a half mile race, and I started coming up behind him to pass him, and he was fast. Started coming up behind him to pass him, and there was probably 100 yards left at the most. And I don't know if this is exactly what he said, but what I remember him saying is looking back over his shoulder and saying, "Oh, fuck no, Camarata." And then he started going faster, and I was giving it 100% at this point. And I think I maybe beat him by one leg length, beat him by a couple of feet. And I puked, and he said, "Okay, Camarata's the new squad leader for 4 Squad." And
you're rehired.
Yeah, so I was rehired basically at that point because I was able to beat him. And ever since then, it was just him trying to make me laugh and me in return trying to make him laugh, which pissed him off, which got me in trouble. And he was definitely my favorite drill instructor for sure.
It sounds pretty harmless in all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, they did some other stuff that was worse than that, but I mean, it's not like they were pushing people around and smacking people. Those days are over.
Right.
Now they get court-martialed for that.
Yeah, exactly. And how long did your boot camp last?
13 weeks.
13 weeks?
Yeah.
And were you able to call home at that time, anytime?
Yeah, so we had Sundays where you would have, I want to say, from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. Or 07 to 1100, as they say. I've been out longer than I was in, so I can say 7 a.m. No, from 7 to 11, they would have church services of different types available at different time slots. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of a free time for those that wanted to go to church, those that wanted to... there was a payphone over near the church, and I think it was like one payphone. Actually, no. Wait a minute. No. And that leads me to another hilarious story in boot camp. That payphone was only to be used the week before graduation because people were calling, making plans for flights, and etc. We didn't have phone calls at all. We wrote letters in boot camp. Letters, which I still have some of. Okay. However, in boot camp, like I said, across the street from the chapel, there's a phone. And I've been out long enough that they can't get me for this one. Me and my friend Sean, we'll just call him by his first name. Sean and I decided to sneak out one night, run down there, past all these barracks full of sleeping recruits, and go into that little phone area and make phone calls home. We called my sister and we called his girlfriend at the time. And that was a dumb enough mistake that we probably could have got at least held back a week or even a whole training cycle. And we got away with it, thankfully, but
nobody caught you.
Nobody caught us, no. And it's hilarious. I think my sister still has the voicemail to this day because we called and left her a voicemail, and then he called his anyways. So it was all letters other than that.
All letters.
And they knew that we weren't supposed to be calling, so they were all kind of like, what are you guys doing? Yeah. But yeah, anyhow.
To save those letters. How priceless.
Yeah, I was going through an old folder recently, my personnel file, and stuffed in there I've got some letters between me and my brother Jack, because he's 10 years younger than me. So when I was in boot camp, he was 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. And then we've got some letters from the same type of, those USO envelopes with the red, white, and blue banner. Right. We've got letters from me to him while he was in boot camp, 10 years and 3 days later.
Wow, how priceless.
So when I got to go to his boot camp graduation, it was a 10-year mark for me having graduated there.
It
was kind of cool.
That's what a legacy.
Yeah, it's great that he went in and he's taken it above and beyond, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, just a great tradition.
Yeah.
So overall, it sounds like you had a pretty positive experience in the 13 weeks then, and ready to move on.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it was great.
They call it advanced training is the next step.
So SOI is the School of Infantry, but ITB is the class that infantrymen go through. It's the Infantry Training Battalion. So did that, and my memory's a little shy on how long that was. 2.5 to 3 months, I want to say.
Is that Camp Pendleton?
Or it could have been only 2. Yeah, that's at Camp Pendleton, yes. Camp Horno, which is up on kind of the northern end,
Mhm.
I think. Of Pendleton.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they've got a few different schools there. BRC is there for basic reconnaissance
Mhm.
course. I want to say there's some NCO schools there as well, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, so.
Yeah, I want to talk about your graduation. You got the uniform after 13 weeks.
Yeah, so you actually have all of your, let me think about this. I think you have all of your uniforms, but where are, now I'm trying to think, where do they keep your blues all during boot camp? Because you never touch them until that week. But you're not like, anyways, yeah, you've got them, but you don't put your blues on at all until that actual day. You do all your drill and training in just camis is what they call them.
Sure. And your parents, your family was able to attend the graduation?
Yeah, my folks were there. My mom's folks were there. My dad's folks were there. I think I had like two and a half, 3 sets of grandparents there.
How'd that feel?
Pretty great. Yeah, to get to look up, and I got to see, my grandfathers from different branches, were there, and
Great.
yeah,
And you
I know
were
that
now
was.
called a Marine?
Yeah, so as of it had been about a week prior to that we were already called Marines and treated as Marines, whereas you'd be called, PFC Camarata rather than recruit Camarata. So you officially gain a rank, and you officially when you do the crucible, it's that I don't know if it's 70. I think it's 72 hours is the length of it.
Mm-hmm.
Gotten so bad with numbers, I should remember all this stuff. 72-hour. It's basically the final physical test. You do.
And you earned it.
Yeah, and you earned it, and you get down there, and they give you the Eagle Globe and anchor, and you go eat a big breakfast. So that's about a week prior to, that was March 26th, and I think graduation was April 3rd, so about a week prior.
Okay, that was in 2009,
2009. Yeah,
okay,
April
yeah.
of 2009.
Now, we're having the Middle East wars going on during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So was that hovering over? Was that discussed at all when you were training the Middle East wars?
Oh, absolutely.
Did they talk about it a lot? Or did you have
in boot camp, not as much. I remember there was a point where we had just completed an obstacle course or some sort of training course, and one of our drill instructors, who was kind of the senior guy when the senior guy wasn't around, so not the senior drill instructor, but I forget that they have different titles for different positions of drill instructors, but anyways, he was he pulled us aside and told us about a young Marine who I want to say it had just recently happened. His name is Kyle Carpenter. And I'm not sure the story behind where he was and when it was, other than that there was a grenade or some type of explosive that he jumped on and ended up severely scarred and had countless surgeries from. And anyways, I remember him pulling us aside and basically letting us know, or reminding us maybe, that there's a whole Marine Corps outside of this 13-week thing you guys feel stuck in.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely said it. He spoke to us like men, whereas most of the time they'd speak to us like, dogs.
Sobering.
Yeah, it was kind of sobering, and I think that was mostly what his intention was, some of you guys are going to be working in an office, and some of you guys are going to be in the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, y'all got to understand that this just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And this dude might not make it, kind of thing. And I don't know if it was that recent. Like I said, I don't remember the dates for Kyle's thing, but anyhow, yeah, it was definitely a moment of them being like, hey, there's a whole Marine Corps outside of this, and y'all are going right into the middle of it.
At that point, Tim, but in the back of your mind, this is what you're preparing for, and were you getting prepared? Like, you probably knew that's the direction you were going to go.
Yeah, we were all just hoping to get Iraq and Afghanistan in within our timeline, because we knew that
you were
things.
Hoping to.
Yeah, because it would have been, to have both, I think would have been. I don't know. It would have been. Somehow it feels like it would have been more of an honor than just to have Afghanistan. But I don't. Everything happened, I think, as it was supposed to. So.
Right. So was it about 3 months at Camp Pendleton? You're saying?
I want to say 2.5 is about right for ITB. Somewhere 2.5 or 3.
And if you'll say it one more time, ITB is?
Oh, Infantry Training Battalion.
Got it. Okay.
It all happens at SOI, which is the School of Infantry. But there are non-infantry personnel who go to a different course. So they do 4 weeks. I think they do 4 weeks and we do 12 weeks. That's what it is. So I guess it is 3 months. So they do 4 weeks of basic, rifle and hand-to-hand stuff. and then they send them on to whatever school they're going to go to, whether it's air traffic controlling or, you know, everything else that they've got.
But you definitely wanted infantry, no question.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
There wasn't any point in it for me otherwise. I would have gone to the Air Force, which I love the Air Force. And I don't mean to say it in a derogatory way. I mean, if I was going to do a specialty that didn't have to do with firearms, I would have joined a branch like the Air Force where I could have specialized in all kinds of other things.
Great.
And also had a much nicer barracks room.
And food.
And everything nicer, yeah.
Okay.
Every Marine wishes he joined the Air Force. I don't care what they tell you.
So you're done with Camp Pendleton, and
And,
now what happens?
Then me and a bunch of guys flew from Pendleton. Half our class went to, half our class, or at least a good chunk of them, stayed at Camp Pendleton and got stationed with infantry units there. 1-1 being one of them. And then a bunch of us got stationed with 3-3, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines over in Hawaii. And
why did you go there?
I want to say it was an alphabetical. I'm pretty sure they split the list literally by your last name. So the first half of the alphabet was getting Hawaii. The second half was getting either Pendleton, or I think a few guys went over to 29 Palms. Poor bastards.
And Hawaii further training.
No, Hawaii. I mean, there was constant training throughout, but Hawaii was where our deploying battalion was based out of. So when we got there to 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, they were currently in Iraq. They were in, oh gosh, I can't remember. Nothing that you've heard any crazy stories about. They were on kind of it was a forward operating base in a combat zone for sure, but it sounds like they were pretty bored most of the time. And they got back and they said, "No, you didn't miss anything." And that was in 2009. And those guys came back and they were, we can get into the culture of the infantry, but they were kind of like dogs that hadn't eaten in 6 months, that had been locked in a cage, and they just got let out and we were food. They were ready to haze and fight people and let us know that they just came back from a deployment and we just got out of school. It was definitely, that's how the culture was then. And I understand it's definitely kind of been cleaned up a little bit since. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of, we were welcomed with hazing and fighting. Oh yeah, it's like, dude, in a few months, we're all going to a whole new sandbox, and you little sons of bitches are coming with us. You bet you're going to get punched in the face. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. You should have figured that out 6 months ago.
That's reality.
Yeah, and it's an interesting reality because, drill instructors and then combat instructors at ITB, they're not allowed to touch you. And 99% of the time they don't. So there's no, there might be little scuffles between students, somebody might get in a little fight or whatever, but for the first 6 months, you're of the understanding that everybody yells and curses, but we're all just here to do our job and it's all good. Then you get here and there's a bunch of 21-year-old drunk lance corporals come running down the stairs and you're like, oh shit, these guys don't follow the rules at all. And they don't. And it was the same way when we got back. We're like, well, we're going to get drunk and find some boots to fuck with. Because that's what you do. And then 6 months later, you're all, in the sand together and everyone respects each other. And if they don't, then they had a chance to.
There you go.
They had a chance to squash it. And it was over those months.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so there comes that moment. It's your turn to fly to the Middle East. And how did they tell you, and how did you get there?
How did they tell us? We knew months in advance because there was a whole thing called a workup. So once we got there, right, our guys got back eventually and we joined our platoons and we got to some basic daily training, right? And we would train everything infantry that you could think of. And then there'd be times we'd go out to the field for a few days at a time. And then there were times when we were officially in what's called a workup, which is, okay, we've got a deployment date set. This is where we're going. We're leaving May 17th. So we have a 6-week course here. We have a 2-week thing there. And we're going to go to different parts of California and Hawaii to do what's called a workup. So we went to 29 Palms for a combined arms course.
Is that like tanks? Or
there is a picture of all of us on a tank somewhere. But we were never involved with tanks. We had seen them and we'd met tank guys, but we were never attached or involved with tanks. Our ground transport was always either 7 tons or Humvees. Yeah.
Mhm.
So anyways, we did a whole workup. So we knew, months and months in advance
Did
where we're
you
going.
feel ready to go? Did
Yeah.
you feel well trained by the time you were going to go?
Oh yeah, especially by then. When you're fresh out of infantry school, it's like I'm well trained, and all I've been doing is, carrying this rifle around and cleaning it every day. I'm well trained in that regard. But there were other things, you know. It was good to have been trained by the guys that you're going to be there with. That big brother kind of mentality where they really did, our daily job, our 9 to 5 was training of whatever kind of training it was. Some days we would sit in the shade and clean our rifles and eat an apple. Other days we'd be running up a mountain with a bunch of radio gear, and we'd have medevac drills, and we'd had all kinds of 9-line drills and different things to prepare for.
And did your leaders had already come and gone to the Middle East?
Yeah.
So
The whole platoon had at least one deployment under them. I'd say probably 15 or 20 guys had just done that one deployment, and then the other 15 or 20 had done.
Had to be beneficial.
There were definitely some senior guys in our platoon that had been, on 5, 6, 7 deployments at that point.
How many?
There were guys with at least 5 or 6 deployments. I know Joe Salinas, I want to say, had probably 7, and he was our platoon sergeant. Yeah, because I think what a lot of them were going, do a deployment, and they would be back in time to rest up and go home for Christmas, and they were going again. Because it was during the years when I was a little guy. I was a kid watching this on the news growing up, and I know there were a lot of times where they didn't stick to the traditional deployment schedule structure that we were used to. Because I think from my understanding, at least back then, it was, there were guys going and going and going.
Just on a side note there, did they dread going back, want to go back, mixed feelings about going back that many times?
I don't know. I think it's probably different for everybody. I know my uncle Kelly, I want to say he did a dozen deployments, and wife, kids through some of it. I think they had kids right around middle of his enlistments. So, but either way, his wife was there through all of it, and I think you probably get tired of it.
Yeah.
Just like any job on the road. I think truck drivers probably get tired of always having to say goodbye to their wife. Obviously it's not the same thing, but
this is more.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. But also, I think at least, and this is just what I would assume. I don't know it, but I think that some of the more senior guys in that platoon of mine had probably been through worse than they were going to go through on my deployments, and they probably had a pretty good sense of that. However, there's a lot of them that had been Iraq, or different parts of the world as well as Iraq throughout. But our entire platoon had never been to Afghanistan, and I want to say that's true for the whole company, but I'm not sure. But I know at least out of the 38, 39 guys I was with, we were all new to Afghanistan. So it was kind of I think there was probably a little bit of a mix of like, well, I've seen everything. I joined in 01. I've seen all this stuff. 09's not going to break me. But then at the same time, they're like, I don't know what to expect in Afghanistan. Different people, different terrain.
Sure.
Different enemy.
Sure, different enemy.
So there was definitely a whole separate set of preparation, I think, for that.
Interesting. So you get the news. So you're on the plane. You're all heading out, and do you remember you thinking about what's this going to be all about when you're actually on that plane going over?
I think the first time I really got in my own head about it was because obviously you're thinking about it, and the guys are talking about it, and here and there, and we would hear reports from from the AO that we were heading to, from Marines that were already there before us. So there was obviously some talk and some thought about it, but yeah, for the most part, I think it didn't really, obviously it set in. I knew where I was going, but it didn't really truly set in until we got to, and this is late in the game, because we had already even been in Afghanistan. We had touched down, traveled from Germany over to, I want to say we went to, Camp Dwyer. So we flew from Kyrgyzstan. That was our middle point. Flew into Germany, flew into Kyrgyzstan, spent like a week there, and then went and flew into a place called Camp Dwyer in Afghanistan, and then from there went to our company fob, which was a place called Kop Turgar. Kop is a company out company outpost is
Okay.
COP,
Mm-hmm.
and Turgar is, I don't know what that means. There was all kinds of
Is
different.
that the name of a location?
I think it was the name of where it was close by to, or maybe a road or something. Well, not a road, but.
How did you get there?
Um,
Fly?
yeah, so we flew from Dwyer in Ospreys. We flew from there to, I want to say from there to our company outpost, or from there to our battalion. Man, that's a long time ago. Anyways, it was a combination of planes and then Ospreys, and then
So
eventually on foot.
Okay, you're flying over that country. Was it rough terrain? What did it look like?
Oh, just brown. It kind of looked like you were just looking at a map, and it was just a brown map, and there was some tan sections and then some brown sections and a little bit of water. Yeah, it's not very attractive over there. Not a very beautiful landscape.
So you're landing at the forward base, and how many altogether were in your group?
Well, in our platoon, I'd say that's probably 38 or 39, and getting over there, we traveled as a platoon or a company. Well, as a company, but then once we got to the company outpost, then we were kind of it was platoons that would take off on foot from there. So that was on foot. So that was kind of the central. The captain and the first sergeant live here, and there's some computers and there's a gym and there's some satellite phones over here you can use, and there's even a place you can take an actual shower. Now, third platoon, get the hell out of here. So we walked. I want to say it was 6 kilometers, maybe 7 kilometers.
Maybe about how many miles?
Oh, 3 or 4 miles probably 4 miles. And we would just step out and basically did it as a patrol, but we had all of our gear with us. So.
And why were you on patrol?
Well, this was just a transport to get us to our final destination, which is where 3rd Platoon was going to live, a place called PB Noba. PB is a patrol base.
Okay.
So they had us all spread out into patrol bases so that you could,
see.
Rather than having everybody here, you'd have 1st Platoon, 2nd Platoon, 3rd Platoon, and maybe weapons platoon down here. And that way you have 5 bases operating, 4 or 5 operating on a smaller level with more ground to cover.
Were there enemy just right in that area?
There was always the idea that it could be that they were free to roam wherever they wanted. Within our patrol base, no. Although there are tragic stories of that happening, of them getting inside of a wall. But
what was your mission?
Well, it depends on who you asked. The mission was to locate high-value targets, HVT.
Which would be the Taliban?
Yeah, a Taliban personnel that was particularly being looked for whatever reason. Our job was to find them.
And when you found them?
Well, sometimes you would detain them. I think there were a couple that went that way. But honestly, these guys were hard to find. They live in little 5-foot tall mud huts, and they all dress pretty much the same, and what we called them man dresses. Probably not the most appropriate thing to say, but they would wear what we call a man dress, and it's a long sleeve, comes all the way down to their ankles, and they wear sandals, and sometimes
they just fight that way?
Apparently, not very well. Yeah, they would wear that, and then like some big leather sandals, and that's what pretty much everybody wore over there. So basically, to answer your question, our job was to walk around for hours, miles and miles and miles. Typically 8 or 10 hours we would go patrol. And at any village we would stop through, and we would, our squad leader would go and talk to find the local elder, and maybe him and one other guy would go up there and chat with them. Sometimes they'd invite us in for tea, which we didn't really enjoy the tea, but it was a nice way to
Were they friendly?
The local townspeople were pretty friendly, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Did the kids just say, "Whoa, look at this"?
The kids knew we had candy.
Yeah.
Because MREs always come with candy, and we'd get care packages with whatever Skittles in it and stuff. So we would give them candy, and they liked pens for whatever reason.
Huh.
They didn't have pens over there, so if we give them like a Skittles and a pen and paper, it was like they remembered us. Even if it was a month later, they'd remember us.
Huh. How about the women? Were they inside all the time?
Oh no, you never
saw
them.
Around?
I didn't know where they kept their women. I think they were inside at all times.
All times.
So it was really odd to me the first time I saw a woman there, because it was like something you would see in a movie, probably completely covered. I don't know how she was seeing. She was walking, She was completely covered. Even her eyes didn't have like a thing cut out. It was almost like they had like a one-way mesh type of deal where she could see where she was going. Like you couldn't see at all. But we just knew that meant that was a woman because a man wouldn't dress like that. But
wow.
yeah,
What a
weird.
culture shock.
Yeah, very weird to me. Very.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely sent me home with a feeling of, oh,
Yeah.
those people are awful in so many ways.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
Was there any schooling for the kids?
Not that we ever saw.
They just kind of hung
They
out?
didn't have a schoolhouse. They didn't have. The only structures they had were those mud huts I described, which would be, some of the houses were as far as width and depth, the size of this house, but they were 5 foot tall, made entirely from mud. No decorations, no flooring, no nothing. It was just mud.
Total poverty.
Oh, total poverty. But it was everybody there. It wasn't like poor people and then they'd have like a nice house. It was just everybody. And they were all farmers of some kind. Some of them grew.
And poppy farmers?
Yeah. There were some. But some of them were growing. We saw okra growing over there. Like the veggie from the south. Like they were like how you can like order fried okra like down in I don't know, Louisiana, Mississippi. I don't really know where okra comes from out here, but yeah, they had that out there. So some of these guys were farming food.
Sheep?
Some sheep, goats more than sheep. Saw donkeys a few times. This one guy I know jumped on a donkey and decided to try to ride it. I don't know why.
Being a dumb guy.
Yeah. He was the designated marksman for his platoon too, which is kind of like a little bit of an elevated. You're kind of expected to be Johnny on the spot, and he's up here just riding on a donkey. But yeah, it was a wild place over there. Very weird.
Hard it must have been such a culture shock. Were those mud huts stable? Like if storm, rain?
They weathered pretty much everything. I imagine from what I could tell, they packed those in so much that it was almost like, if you've ever been down to Southern California or Arizona, sometimes you'll see like walls that
Adobe type?
What's that?
Adobe type?
Yeah, and it kind of like I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but whatever they're doing over there, it seems to be pretty structurally sound because, they're living a whole family with babies in those things.
Wow.
Filthy.
Wow.
There is not a bottle of all-purpose cleaner within 1,000 miles.
Did it smell?
Oh, yeah. Well, and they had this canal that ran right through the middle of everything. And we lived right next to the canal. And these people use this canal for, if you can name a thing that you do in your life that involves water, they scooped it out of that canal. Drinking, bathing, washing the car, cooking, etc. All from that canal. I'm like, you guys are going to live to be 30.
Yeah, no kidding.
So we had pallets and pallets of water, drinking water, shipped in to us. They would drop off a truckload of waters and stuff for us.
Okay, your mission was to go out and look for potential Taliban enemy. How would you know if you saw one?
Sometimes just a description, sometimes there was photos, sometimes if guys were acting fishy, if a guy had a shovel, if more than one guy had an AK, there would be enough cause for, we had an interpreter with us at all times too. So that would be enough cause for us to go up and be like, hey, what are you doing? Stop here, and we would search people, check people. There were vehicle checkpoints sometimes. But really a lot of it was just walk around. Not just walk around. We would have a route picked out on a map, of course. But
Jim, did you feel like you're putting a thumb in the dam, but it would just spurt out somewhere else? You know what I'm saying? It just didn't seem.
Yeah.
It just seemed like it was the Wild West, and it's a curious question.
Yeah. There was definitely some conversation there amongst the younger guys and some of the older guys too. Older being 30 instead of 20. So, everyone there was pretty, able-bodied young guys. But some of the younger guys, there was definitely some talk of, why don't they fly over with a helicopter with 1 million flyers in it, dump them all over this entire province, and say, 72 hours, get out of this territory. 72 hours.
Wouldn't that seem logical?
And at the end, just roast the place.
Yeah.
If you actually want to extinguish an enemy, But that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to, gain the hearts and minds. We heard the term hearts and minds a lot on that deployment. They wanted to gain the hearts and minds of the local people. They wanted our squad leaders and platoon sergeants to be friends with their elders.
Was it working?
No. I mean, the elders liked that we built a $500,000 bridge for them.
Right.
We didn't build it, of course, the common engineers and stuff,
Right.
but they liked that we delivered the message of the government's going to build you a bridge. The government's going to build you a water source. They were good, they were doing industrial improvements for this random shit village in the middle of Helmand.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around like, the fuck are we doing here? But we knew that was kind of like, in hindsight, I guess you could say it was kind of like, I don't want to call it a front, because I mean, those things did help those people for a time, but it was almost like oh yeah, we're here to give money to the elders and we're building a dam. That's all we're doing. We're just security for the guys building the dam.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think the overall mission was to make a democracy like the American system? This is get rid of the bad guys and...
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely an effort to...
Do you feel that was going on? Trying to attempt?
You could say that. I guess so. I don't know.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, I was at such a young age and rank that for me, anything above the platoon or company level was way outside of my pay grade.
Exactly.
To me, I was like, all right, as long as my platoon sergeant's happy and my squad leader's happy, I'm good to go.
There you go.
And then one day I'll be a squad leader, maybe even a platoon sergeant. So for me, it was like my first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, my first 10 years is going to be right here at the platoon level. Obviously, things didn't go that way, but...
Sure, understood.
Yeah.
Tell me, how many months were you there the first time?
7.5. I want to say it was like 7 and 3 weeks or something like that. Less than 8.
And what determined that you were gonna come home at that time?
Oh, so they had it set up to where each battalion. So there were 3 infantry battalions in a division. In a regiment. So 1, 3, 2, 3, and 3, 3. Well, it was 3, 3's turn to go. That means it's 2, 3's turn to do a workup and 1, 3's turn to kind of rest in the rear. And then so it would basically they had it on a calendar to where it was supposed to be 7 months for you guys. These folks will come and overlap. You'll spend a few weeks together. You'll go home. These guys who have been resting will come over and overlap, spend a few weeks together, and then they'll go home. So it was on a cycle.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. By the way, refresh my memory. Was Iraq also going on at that time?
I mean, it still was definitely going on as far as we had troops over there, but as far as the Marine Corps' involvement, I want to say that was kind of the point where Iraq was starting to be. I don't want to misspeak here, but I think Iraq was kind of chilling out at that point.
Exactly.
Not chilling out. I mean, there were still things going on there. Tapering off. Thank you. I think it was tapering off, and Afghanistan was more ramping up.
The daily livings. By the way, were you ever during that whole time? Were you in harm's way at any time? Any particular incident that happened?
I mean, I think you're in harm's way the whole time you're there.
Yeah. All right. And that is another question. Were you just pretty much always looking over your shoulder, always prepared?
Oh yeah.
Because nothing was predictable. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, when we would do our patrols, there would be every so often you would do a little 360. Keep walking, but I'd turn around and walk backwards, give a nod to the guy behind me, whatever, check out the surroundings and whatnot, and then go back to forward.
Sure. Did you sleep okay?
I slept pretty well. I've kind of always slept pretty well. Once I'm out, I'm out. Loud noises will wake me up, but that's about it.
So always hyper-vigilant, I guess is the word.
Yeah, I mean, the term is head on a swivel. You hear that term a lot. Is keep your head on a swivel. Is
Sure.
your head's just always doing this, always looking,
Yeah.
you know, up, down, and left and right and behind you. And
Yeah.
he keeps an eye on me. I keep an eye on him.
Sure.
You know.
So, reflecting back as a kid, was it just totally different than what you anticipated as a kid?
It was different in ways, but I don't think totally. I think it was. I think for the most of the time that I was in, I pretty much had the mentality of, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I,
Mm-hmm.
this is what you asked for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. By the way, communication back home, was it sparse or how'd that go?
If we're talking, yeah, in Afghanistan it was sparse. There was a little bit of letter writing, but most of the letters would consist of like a grocery list, a care package list,
Right.
because a care package that comes out of love is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But a care package that's full of Doritos, Oreos, and Camel 99s, now that's a care package. And you kind of had to request that. And there were a lot of guys that, myself included, weren't exactly comfortable asking their mom for a carton of cigarettes because
Yeah.
little Timmy didn't smoke. I never smoked cigarettes. I mean, I'd smoked a few in high school, but they didn't know about that. But yeah, I think at one point we asked my mom or dad, I can't remember who ended up doing it. Like, we need 2 cartons of cigarettes and some Oreos. But then there was a satellite phone, but it just was. Remember I told you about the company outpost and then our patrol base over here.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to walk that 6 or 7 kilometers if we wanted to use Facebook, satellite phone, take a real shower, and then we had to walk all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
So
What did you think your parents were thinking the whole time?
the worst, probably.
You're worried, of course.
Worried, yeah. I think mom especially was
Of course.
just worried, because there was very little communication and they didn't really know what to expect, and they didn't exactly have a point of contact, to call and. But every chance that we got, we would go up there and, hey yo, everything's good. Let them know they're feeding us plenty.
You're getting shot at, but everything's
Yeah. So I mean, I think they worried, but probably no more than any other parent would.
But there was no such thing as R&R lead time, battle time. It was just straight through.
Yeah. So everything went in 8-hour shifts the whole time we were there. So roughly 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Overlap definitely happened depending on situation.
Sure. Were there casualties while you were there?
Yeah. There were. On that first deployment, there were casualties. Within our battalion, I don't know how many. Not many, but there were between 7 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple guys that I didn't know or barely knew,
Mm-hmm.
and then a few that I knew well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're wrapping down that first assignment, then you're going back to Camp Pendleton then?
After that deployment,
Uh-huh.
no, we went back to Hawaii. So we flew back, and we always had a stateside layover. So I think the layovers were in Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore Airport, somewhere in that area.
Mhm.
They were different each time, but yeah. So we flew back, and then we even had 4 or 5 days again at that place in Kyrgyzstan that I told you about,
Mhm.
Manas Air Base.
Mm-hmm.
So we had, by the time we got up and left our patrol bases, it was probably 9 or 10 days before we saw Hawaii again.
Mm-hmm. When you left from that first deployment, how did you feel about your assignment there? Like, we did good, job well done, unfinished business?
Yeah.
All the above?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say unfinished business. I think we all knew that we'd be coming back, but we didn't
Did
exactly
you?
know where we would be going next. But we
You
knew.
You did realize that, uh-huh.
Yeah. And they all went back, in the same rotation for 3-3's timing.
Right.
I just wasn't with all those same guys like we all thought I would be.
Sure.
It was me and 19 other guys went off and deployed with strangers, and everyone was all kind of like, it was kind of like we love you, man, but have fun with those guys, I guess. It was like switching teams almost. I mean, it was our sister battalion, but still, it was like,
That's funny.
yeah, it was like an awkward divorce for our platoons.
Very well said. Very well said. So, how long did it take before you came back again then? What was the break time?
So break time, I want to say 7 months or 8 months
between time.
between. Yeah, it was July or let me think here. Don't want to misspeak, but I suck with dates. July or August of 11, we went back over there. Me and those 20 guys, combat replacements, and then from there I was with 1-3 Alpha Company.
Okay, so coming back through the rotation and then coming back pretty much to the same place.
Very much, yeah. So it was still Helmand Province, different AO, area of operation, but very, very familiar terrain, very familiar. Everything looked the same.
It did.
Everything felt the same. You know, I was like, oh, I'm back here just with a whole new cast and crew, you know. And there's a couple guys that I know. A couple of my buddies are here, but for the most part, it was like, who's this?
Repeat performance.
Yeah, repeat performance just with a whole... That second deployment almost feels... It was so short and so many unfamiliar things about it that it almost feels like... Did that happen? Did I dream that? It happened. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, there was a second deployment. Interesting.
Any circumstances on the second deployment?
Circumstances.
Well, I should say incidents, casualties.
Oh, you know, things were we all got pretty lucky over there. I know there were a few casualties before I got there. In fact, I found out after that deployment was over that that's whose rifle I ended up with.
That's right.
Whose rifle I was carrying around for that 4.5 months. Yeah. I'm like, you mother effers could have told me that before. Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh.
I don't know. I don't, you know. It turned out fine, but yeah.
I am curious about that. Did your parents, they knew there was going to be a second deployment, is that correct? You're going to go back?
I think we all had a pretty good understanding that the way the rotations were going and you know, the length of deployments, it was pretty understood that there'll be a couple.
Did you get to see them in the break time?
I did, yeah. Yeah, so post deployment of the first one, got back in time for Christmas 2010. So I got to go home, see the family. Christmas, I want to say Christmas, New Year's. And had ample time with the family. Saw some friends from back home.
Good.
Enough time to kind of come back and chill.
Yeah. Good.
Which is all you want to do when you're over there. All you want to do is, I'm going to sleep in my own bed. My parents haven't touched my bedroom. I'm going to go in there and sleep for like 2 days straight. I'm going to drink a beer with my dad. Yeah.
Baking your favorite meal.
Yeah, exactly. Mom's going to cook for me for 10 days straight.
You got it.
Yeah, that's like the fuel that gets you through some of the crappier parts.
Oh, absolutely right.
For sure.
Well, then just describing the second tour, did you see pretty much the same villagers, same situation?
Not the same people, but it almost felt like you've ever seen a classic movie and then they try to remake that movie later on?
Not the same.
Different actors, different set, different director. But it's still like I'm still watching what I can't think of an example of a movie they've done that with. But you know what I mean? It almost kind of felt like that, like a remake.
Yeah.
But I was starring in the remake, even though I starred in the original.
Top Gun.
Yeah, like, right? Like I'm like, wait a minute, why am I on this B-list version of a movie I already starred in?
I love it.
But yeah, it was just it was almost kind of a surreal feeling because it was this entire battalion that we joined. You know, it was just like we had our entire battalion. And there were some guys, like I said, that you barely knew. You might have met them or saw them a couple times, but it's such a large unit of guys that to us, it was our company that we were really tight with.
Sure.
And then it was our platoon that you were really tight with. So I got in there, I was like, all right, I'm going to get tight with this platoon. I don't have time to meet all these other guys.
Right. And Tim, it truly is the band of brothers, is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
You protect, sleep, eat, the whole bit together.
Oh, yeah.
Closer sometimes than a family.
Yeah, definitely. You know, they call each other brothers. We call each other brothers.
To this day.
Yeah, there's definitely still some guys. I think, I mean, any of them. If I run into any Marine today, you know, I would gladly call him my brother. But there's definitely those few guys that you get real close with that 10, 20 years down the line, you know, you can call them at 2 a.m. and they'll say, hey, brother, I'm here for you. And not everybody's that way with each other.
Yes.
Now, there are guys from my platoon that I never had a personal relationship with. I wouldn't be the guy they would call.
Sure.
They had their own best friend from the platoon or whatever.
Sure. It's
but
just
there's
the dynamic.
Yeah, but if that didn't work out, I hope they would call me next, you know.
Sure. Very unique to the military.
Very unique, yeah.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, and held in high regard in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure it is in other branches, but just from my experience, the Marine Corps, yeah,
Very
definitely.
admirable.
Careful.
Yeah. By the way, I wanted to touch on the food. Did you eat the MREs? Did you eat the
Oh, on
village?
deployment, we ate MREs. There was a lot of those. We would get them by the pallet, so you'd have hundreds of MREs to choose from. And then we would also have these meals that was basically like an MRE, but for a group of 12. So they would have this big cardboard box with these different layers in it, and it would have. So in an MRE, they have these hot pad things that you can add water, and they get real hot and heat up your meal. Well, it would have big ones of those in different trays with different foods. So there was like a Szechuan chicken and roast beef and potatoes and all these different like meals that would be, but they're in these big boxes. I'm like, what are we in space? And you would pull a tab and add water or something like that.
Oh my
And then 10 minutes later, it would be dinner time and we would all feast. And it wasn't good food, but it was nutritionally
Right.
sufficient.
Did you lose weight?
No, I actually gained some weight.
That's amazing.
Because between unlimited MREs, I mean, they would never tell you, oh, you've had 7 of those today, you can't have any more. Well, I just walked 14 miles and I'm lifting weights for the second time today, so I'm going to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there would be sometimes care packages with a pound of beef jerky in them, and then we'd just randomly get other things like, I want to say, I can't remember if it was 4th of July or Thanksgiving, whatever it was, the company made like a big feast, like grilled for everybody, and then sent it out to all the different platoons. So we had a bunch of like steaks dropped off one time, and I want to say we had turkey or ribs or something dropped off because it was like it's Thanksgiving or 4th of July. You can't just be eating MREs. But yeah, no, I actually gained weight, but it was like a muscle gain because I was. My whole thing when I was in is I was going to be the biggest, strongest, fastest, toughest dude. Nobody was going to mess with me because I knew I had an attitude and I had to be able to defend it. So I was always trying to put on weight, and I grew up skinny. I've always been a pretty tall, thin guy. So I was like, all right, I'm going to have to work extra hard.
By the way, how heavy was your backpack?
Oh man, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we weren't wearing much for a pack. We would, for a patrol, for those long hikes we were taking, for the most part, you'd have all your gear, your flak jacket with sappy plates and everything in it. And then you just have ammunition, which in my case, as a saw gunner, I think we carried between 1,000 and 1,200 rounds in 200 round drums. But sometimes you'd pass a couple off, hey, take 100 for me, but how heavy for that one initial hike in, I want to say those bags were probably 80, 90 pounds.
Oh my
Pretty
gosh,
hefty.
you'd have to be in shape.
Oh yeah, we were in great shape.
Oh my
They made
gosh.
sure of that because they're like, hey, you're going to carry everything you own
Wow.
3 miles on your first day.
And is it up and down, steep?
Not too bad. For the most part, it was flat terrain. There were times when we'd have to go down into a canal because they did not have a lot of bridges there.
Hot?
So we'd have to go hot. Yeah. We got there in May, so things were really warming up.
Like how, over 100?
Over 100, over 110, over 120.
Humid?
Yeah, humid. There was a time when I can't remember who it was, but somebody in our platoon had so you'd wear these camouflage pants, right, and then the camouflage tops that I'm sure you're familiar with the buttons and everything. Well, on deployment, you left those behind, and they gave you something that looked a lot like it, but it was a pullover shirt with a little zipper on it, and it was flame retardant operational gear, frog gear. That's what they called it. So they give you like 5 of these frog tops, and they're these really lightweight, breathable shirts, but they still have the camo sleeves. Anyway, somebody had got back from a patrol and was so sweaty and so humid and so just soaked in sweat. Well, he took his shirt off, and it I guess he set it in front of the fan, or I don't know what the deal was, but this thing hardened from all the salt that was stuck to it. It hardened and became like this hard, like it would stand up on its own. So then I want to say he put that over something, and it became just like I'm sure eventually he must have washed it or sprayed it down or something, but there was so much salt in this thing that it solidified in the shape of this guy, but it was off of his body. So I kind of gave you a perspective of okay, you better drink a lot of water and have some salt, because
My Lord, boy, I tell
Yeah.
you, war is something. Did you any diary, any photographs, or did you have time to do any of that?
no diary. I've never really kept a journal of any kind. We got some photographs. Yeah, I didn't bring any with me today, but we definitely took some.
Yeah.
There's a couple of platoon size photos, and then a few that were a squad size, so 12 or 13 guys, and then a few that was like 3 or 5 or 6 of us, just kind of
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that stuff happened inside the wire. Inside the while we were at the patrol base, guys would be chilling in flip flops and shorts and no t-shirt, and that was kind of the time when we can play cards and take pictures and
There was some downtime.
There was some downtime, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
So like those 8-hour rotations, I was saying, what it was supposed to be, and there was lots of overlap, lots of flexibility, but what it was supposed to be was 8-hour patrol, 8-hour rest, 8-hour post, which is give me 4 of your guys out of your 12. Give me 4 of your guys to go sit in a guard tower for 8 hours. So you would rotate. But in that 8 hours rest, you were QRF, which is
QRF is
quick reaction force.
okay.
So if second squad gets into some trouble, we're going to be the ones running out there.
Got it.
So you were resting and it was your free time, but I don't care if you're on the satellite phone with your mom or if you're taking a shit. We're going to be outside the wire in 30 seconds, kind of deal.
Boy, well trained, Tim. Well trained.
Yeah. I had some good instructors and some good mentors in the fleet as well.
Good leadership.
Good leadership. Yep, I definitely did. I had some bad leadership too.
Yep. Boy.
Only one guy.
Wow. Yeah, that's.
I could only name one guy I would consider bad leadership, and I'm not going to put his name out there like that.
Yeah.
But he knows who he is.
Yeah. Wow. Well, boy. So it's time to come home, time to get out of the service, and were you kind of looking forward to getting out of the service?
I'll tell you what, I was actually not ready to get out of the service. So it was time to come home. Second deployment was over. And at that point I was at 3 years and some change. But what I never mentioned to you at the start of the story was that by way of $15,000 bonus, Sergeant Mestel and his fellow recruiters managed to talk me into a longer enlistment.
Oh, sweet.
Not sweet. Not sweet once you realize everyone's getting out and going home and I got to do another deployment. Well, what was actually going to happen was, so I get home from second deployment. Me and those 19 other guys, we were immediately detached from 1-3, from our unit we had just been with. They went on about their business. We weren't part of them anymore. And so we're like, okay, we go report to headquarters Marine Corps. We go to report to headquarters on our base. And some master sergeant basically put us on landscaping duty. We were cutting the grass, we were picking up trash, we were sweeping and mopping. It was just some whatever random kind of chores they needed done. And that was our job until 3-3 got home from Afghanistan.
How long was that?
That was a few months. Let me think about that. That was, I want to say like 4 or 5 months.
Wasn't that just
but mine got
demeaning?
A little bit, but also we got away with a lot of free time and messing around and smoking cigarettes when we were supposed to be working. So nobody really complained because it was kind of like who's our boss, and it was that guy is. I guess we kind of just like answered. We kind of just like automatically appointed one guy who everybody knew him as like the big brother type, the older guy in our group. And we were Marines in platoons, so we naturally knew who to automatically pick as a leader, I guess. But anyways, it was kind of one of those times of like, this barely feels like we're in the military. Guys would kind of push it and just like not shave one day just to see if they could get away with it, and they did because nobody cared.
Pushing the envelope.
Yeah, it pushed it a little bit. But during that time, there were some guys that pushed it a lot further than not shaving, meaning drinking and doing drugs. There was some of that. Because there was, the temptation was there. And sometimes guys were like, we don't have a company first sergeant. We're not accountable to anybody. 3-3's not going to be home for another couple months.
Sure.
So there's definitely some times, some party times.
Yeah. But that would be understood, Tim.
Yeah.
I mean, the door was open for it.
I would hope so, yeah.
Yeah, it would be open for that, yeah.
Yeah.
But you got to the end of it then, and so you left the Marine Corps in 2012 then. Mm-hmm. Did you were in Hawaii at the time?
Yeah.
Did you come back to Idaho, or where did you come back to?
So I came back to, at that point, my family who, like when I told you, when I enlisted, they were living in Spokane. So they lived in Spokane during the years that I was in. So that was where I would go home for leave. It was always to their Spokane house up on 5 Mile Hill. And sometime during my final year in, they rented out the house and to my sisters, my 2 older sisters, who stayed behind and lived there as roommates. Mom and Dad and the younger siblings moved back to Olalla, where we're from. So when I got out, I was like, well, kind of don't really have much of a plan right now. I'm going to go crash with my parents. Crash between my parents and my best friend's house for a few weeks. And then I was like, I'm going to go out to Spokane and take a week by myself, go visit some buddies I've got over there from when I lived there in '08.
Did you feel a little bit lost, disoriented,
Oh, yeah.
back in the civilian world?
Nobody was telling me what to do. It was weird.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't even no one's telling me what to do. It's no one's expecting me to do these things. Because you get to a point where you don't have to be told. You know what to do and you just do it. So I kept like, one thing I definitely immediately stopped was shaving. I've always hated shaving. But other than that, it was like, yeah, I'm kind of growing this beard and I haven't got a haircut in a while. That feels wrong. But also, like, if the alarm goes off, I can simply turn it off and go back to sleep for a few more hours. So then I was like, oh shit, I got to get a job before I get too complacent. Well, got a job at a bar and restaurant. Oh, fast forward to a few weeks later. So I was home crashing with my parents for probably like a month, just kind of like, what am I going to do? But also hanging out, catching up with the family, you know. Then I went over to Spokane, visited those friends, like I said, and ended up moving there, more specifically moving to Coeur d'Alene, because I was informed by my new girlfriend that we were going to have a baby, who you've met.
And that's that darling little...
And that's that little one that just went looking for a first aid kit.
Allie.
So for that reason, Coeur d'Alene, Spokane area kind of immediately became my home base. So I've lived back in Tacoma for a couple of years while I was working over there, and I lived down in Texas and Arizona for a time.
Texas too?
I was in Texas for about 9 months. But yeah. So
and stayed in touch with your buddies. Did you join any veterans organizations? Stay in touch with your buddies?
I stayed in touch with a few guys. Yeah, with those 3 or 4 guys that I was closest with. Maybe 5 or 6 guys.
I think you described it well. You didn't have that structure anymore. It's just a different life.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to. I think the alarm clock is the best way to put it. Sometimes I'd wake up before my alarm because I was so used to it's 5:15. I am awake. And then other times it would take every bit of strength that alarm clock had to get me out of that bed. But then once I was out, I was like, I'd find myself setting an alarm. 5:15. I'm like, what am I doing at 5:15? And then for a while I would continue to just exercise by myself, and I for a lot of years I continued lifting weights and whatnot. But
I am very interested in knowing if your military experience influenced the way you think about war or military in general. You can just answer that in any way. How it influenced you being in the military.
Well, I love the military. I don't love the government. I don't love the idea of war. When you really sit down and explain to a 5-year-old what war is, you kind of realize when you put it in those terms,
That's right.
oh God, what have we done? But at the same time, there have been wars before me and there will be wars after mine.
That's right. Good answer, Tim. And how would you say your service and experiences affected your life?
I think they've affected my life in a positive way. Yeah, I think it really was a good transition for me out of, being a rambunctious kid in high school to kind of harnessing that and having a place to put it. And definitely taught me a lot about respect and camaraderie. And, I hear people say a lot that, everyone's experience is different, of course, but I hear people say stuff about, men don't talk about their feelings or tough guys don't, whatever. All that stigma that I think is kind of out there for men's mental health or even just stuff like that, I think is... I think the military, or at least my experience with it, has kind of set me up for a position of, I don't see it that way. I don't see it as I'm not gonna do that. I see it as I use instructions that I received for my daughter. I use military training for my daughter in a certain way, not necessarily, we're not out here on the parade deck doing drill, and we're not at the rifle range. I mean, not yet. She's still a little shy of that, but I just mean leadership as far as some of the one-on-one counseling that I received from senior guys while I was in, I think had a lot of impact on me, probably more than those guys realize. Because there's something to be said about someone senior to you pulling you aside and saying, listen, this is the path you're on. This is the path you could and should take. This is a path you shouldn't take. You know what I mean? Just for example. And I've kind of used that style of leadership because a lot of guys that I knew would use an example, like when I was a Lance Corporal, I did this, and here's how it turned out for me, and kind of made it personal. And I try to do that, with my daughter or even with my kid brother. And, they're all grown men now, but.
Well, I see a fantastic relationship with you and your daughter.
Oh, thanks.
It's a beautiful, it's very admirable.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's I'm very impressed with that.
I appreciate that. We've got a lot of love and a little story of our own too.
Yeah,
so.
she's very special.
Yeah.
And I understand maybe you influenced your younger brother to join the Marine Corps. Am I right?
Yeah, I think there was a bit of influence from me. He was there writing me letters when he could barely write. He was probably, I think he was in second grade. Maybe
and that would be Jack.
That would be Jack, yep. And they would all write letters, but Jack would put his own little note in there. And, he was a little guy. And he came to the graduation, and I could just see it in his eyes, even as a young kid. He was just like so proud and so interested in it and in awe almost, seeing all the, and it's a lot of colors and the parade deck and things that little kids have never seen. And so I think that was inspiring for him. And then growing up, especially in high school when it started getting closer to the time for him to shit or get off the pot, he would start kind of asking me more and more questions. And he definitely, I think, looked to me for a little bit of counsel, but I think I kind of already knew that he was going to, with or without me, but obviously better do it with me, and so I think I was kind of able to not steer him in the right direction, but at least just give him little nudges, make sure you ask your recruiter about that, or make sure you do this before you do that. And because he kind of, he was more methodical and had more of a plan about it rather than on his way home from work, stopped at the recruiter's office kind of deal.
Tell us where he is today.
So he is currently a sergeant, and he is at Camp Pendleton. He is an instructor at the Recon Snipers course.
Excellent.
Which is a course that he has gone through in the past. In fact, he was the, I think it's called Coffee or Die magazine. Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Or Black Rifle Coffee Company. It's one of the two. Anyhow, they do different articles and interviews on different types of combat units. And one of them was they covered the basic reconnaissance course. And so there's a school for scout snipers in the Marine Corps, and it's been around for decades. And any sniper you ever met went through that school. Well, as of just a few years ago, I'm not sure the date of when it was, but they opened a new school that was particularly for recon snipers. And Jack was a student in the first class at that school. So he ended up on the cover of this magazine, and they did this whole photo shoot and video thing with these guys, and it was a real cool experience for him. Well, now, a few years later, it was time for him to re-enlist. So he had a 5-year contract. Because of recon, I think they require that as part of, if we're going to put so much training into you, we require 5 years commitment. So once that 5 years was up, he and his wife had considered getting out and doing other things. But when it came down to it, he decided, this is what I want to do. And so I think he negotiated a little bit and got himself the package that he wanted. But so they gave him a re-enlistment package where he is now an instructor for young snipers.
And name your parents who are so proud of their 2 Marine sons.
Ron and Lori Camarata, they are very proud.
Yes, they are.
They've got the stickers on the car. They've got the hoodies. No, they do. They are very proud, and they showed up for his graduation as well as mine, and they've always been definitely very supportive and loving and understanding too. You know, a lot has happened since my end of service that they've just been very, you know, just very understanding and loving and always been the supportive parents that I think anybody would want in that
I've met
lifestyle.
them, and they certainly are loving parents.
Yeah, they're pretty great.
Yes, they are. All right, in wrapping this up, is there anything that you would like to add to the interview that I may not have covered or you didn't cover? Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you. He knows. I always get emotional at the end.
Oh.
I do. Because I admire you. You patriots, you brave heart so much. So thank you, Tim, for taking this special time out today, coming down from Idaho to do this interview. I thank you for all you've done for this country and taking this time. I appreciate you. So that's it.